I didn't sleep before my flight on my first trip to Paris. Instead, I packed and repacked, making revisions to my carefully cultivated wardrobe. Having recently procured the ashes, I was quite sure that my travels would be a one-way journey, either in that, in honoring my dad's death, I would encounter my own, or that I would accidentally find my forever home, a place of true and sincere belonging, something that had eluded me my entire life. Despite modern travel infrastructure, I imagined waking into a remote little known and hard to pronounce town. Road weary and feet dusty and sore. I would make my way through the tiny streets, marveling at the cute, colorful houses, well integrated with natural accents. All manner of animals would greet me inquisitively and follow me with curiosity to a large, almost medieval inn with an ample outdoor terrace that abutted a slow flowing stream teeming with tiny fish. I set my large backpack on a table near the stream and crouched close to the water, dipping my hand in for a small taste before splashing the sun warmed water on my face and neck, cleaning the grime from my pilgrimage. Even the fish were friendly, and I stared back into the faces of a small school making kissy fish lips to them before the growl from my belly reminded me of the fine line between friend and foe, or in this case, friend and food. I turned to my table to find that a plate of sauteed fiddleheads and a large piece of quiche had already been placed for me. There was no menu here, there was just one meal to rule them all, and was exactly what everyone seemed to want. With the sipped water from the stream absorbed, and belly pain placated by my hurried bites of food, my thirst returned, and with it so did the innkeeper, as if reading my biorhythms. They carried two tankards, one of water and one of dry cider, and a small dessert plate of Dad's bread dripping with butter and honey. The innkeep chatted to me unhurriedly about my travels and the years before the town's incorporation, a rich history in which this town had always been a sanctuary against warring political parties and personal unrest. I was introduced to all manner of townsfolk, nearly all having moved from somewhere else to there, carrying with them their own ashes, stories of migration, struggle, loss, grief, and finally acceptance of self, others, and their place and purpose in the world. The innkeeper asked what my plans were, and I said that I was sans plan, but that I had left behind a Merlin so needed to return to my former life at some point. Ignoring the presented napkin, I licked the melted butter and honey from my fingers and explained that I was looking for my forever home. The innkeeper's eyes lit up, and they explained that they were wanting to retire and asked if I wanted the job of innkeeper. It was seasonal and paid well enough to travel full time in the off season. Pets were not just welcomed, they were insisted upon. I eagerly accepted, and there was an inaugural ceremony in my honor, swearing me in as the new innkeeper. I would invite close family and friends, and Merlin and I were carried through the town on the shoulders of the townsfolk. I woke up to the plane touching down at Charles de Gaulle. My eyes opened directly to those of my weary neighbor in the window seat, and the knowledge that I had been sleeping on their shoulder, for I suspected that entire 6-hour flight. I was headed first to Paris to spend time with a group of friends I had met in Montreal on their various internships. These were cool kids, a clever, multi-talented crew with above average humor and intellect. It was an honor to be ingratiated into the gang as Mama Trace, my being a few years older and of a nurturing nature. In Montreal, they would frequent my apartment where I was at the ready with an array of foods and beverages to tickle and intoxicate the taste buds. We would party on my block length roof, engaging in consciousness altering conversations and substances, and the odd snowball battle during a good snowstorm. It was perilous, prohibited pure revelry. When my dad died, the Frenchies rallied in support, and I packed my most Parisian clothing and accessories and set off to scatter dad in style. Paris is worth the hype. I do not know what else to say. I fell in love with life there, my friends there, and every stranger that I happened by in the street there. I took to taking long walks around the city when my friends were at work, or to move through a hangover. The many cafes with their tiny tabled terraces, menus written on chalkboards in flourishing font, and cheek kissing comrades filled me with both longing and belonging. It was all I could do to ask if any management was looking to retire so I could retire my fruitless search for lasting fellowship. The historic landmarks seemed so unaffected by the rapid pace of modernity, and I marveled at how well integrated the architecture was with the city's newer amenities. It was no surprise that my friends there also embodied that same cleverness and intelligence. In those initial days of ash scattering, I was not thinking of honoring my dad, but rather was giving him an unsolicited view of how I had been living and traveling, unfettered, benevolently hedonistic, and free. I selfishly believed that him wanting to go to the same places I traveled meant that he wanted to travel I did. I believe to some degree I was not entirely wrong. He never indulged in a secular self, living as he did for the promise of place in the kingdom in the afterlife. I felt no shame for making my deliberate mistakes in hopes that they were my crawl before walking, and that my self indulgent worldly curiosity and experience would give way organically to an integrated self in which all of those life experiences culminated in some type of professional merit. The proverbial slap of reality and recognition that my movement lacked true intent became obvious in my avoidance of interacting with his ashes in altered company or states of consciousness. I instead waited for a shame laden hangover in which I would take to power walking the streets along the Seine River solo until the detoxifying sheen of sweat gave way to tears of grief and dismay at my lack of direction, both inside and out. I would deliberately lose myself to the infrastructure of the city, scattering ash like breadcrumbs back to a whole self. It was only in the directional recalibration of my body that my psyche felt a sense of ease. As within, so without, the law of correspondence at work. I would return back to the apartment with self satisfaction that I had found my way home again, and that dad had been released from the disorienting Rue de Remords. The cycle of toxic codependency and denial of grief that I found myself trapped in bore a striking resemblance to the rugged landscapes of Wyoming, where the vast expanses of wilderness mirrored the depths of my own internal turmoil. For too long, I had been ensnared in a pattern of seeking validation and solace from external sources, oblivious to the gaping wound left by the loss of my father. It wasn't until I turned my gaze inward, confronting the shadowy depths of all my unactualized selves, that I began to glimpse the path towards healing and transformation. With each step along the dark roads of introspection, I unearthed buried truths and confronted long suppressed emotions, shedding light on the layers of denial that had obscured my journey towards self discovery. I made a solemn pledge to myself and to the memory of my father to redirect the precious resource of opportunity towards endeavors that held deeper meaning and resonance. No longer content to squander my time and energy on pursuits that offered only fleeting gratification, I resolved to honor my father's legacy by investing in endeavors that spoke to the core of my being, finding, within his ashes, a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the impermanence of existence.